Good evening, friends. Good to see you on Facebook Live. I'm very new to this. I don't know how this works. So here's hoping that it will go well. Uh, as promised, this is a small talk on the secret history of the Phool Walon ki Sair. Before I begin, just to hope that all of you are well, healthy, safe at home, with a short sort of just thinking about all those people who may not be so privileged as we are to be sitting in our homes, and our greatest challenge is how to occupy ourselves. People who are in the healthcare sector, we working very hard to fight this virus for us, and also those who are not so fortunate as us, who are worried about shelter, who are worried about food. So with a little sort of, I guess, if I were a religious person, I'd say a prayer for them, but yes, remembering them. But in the meanwhile, let's start with the Phool Walon ki Sair. I'm going to assume that there will be a few people joining in who don't know the history at all, may not have heard of the Phool Walon ki Sair. So I'm going to start the very beginning. What is the Phool Walon ki Sair? There's a very interesting festival that happens in Delhi, specifically in Mehrauli, and this is the area right adjoining the Qutub Minar. Uh, it's it's a village. It's a village. It's Delhi's really Delhi's oldest continuously inhabited area, and it's been inhabited for many centuries. And this Phool Walon ki Sair is a festival that happens every year. It usually happens after the monsoon is over, around October, and it's a festival of it's a city festival, and it's a festival of communal harmony, because um, there are pankha. Also in the old days, it used to be called the Pankho Ka Mela. Uh, Pankhas, fans of flowers, are presented at the Jogmaya Mandir, and Chadar and Pankhas at the Dargah of Qutub Bakhtiyar Kaki. It's an old Dargah of a very renowned Sufi, Qutub Bakhtiyar Kaki, which is there. And of course, Jogmaya Mandir is also a very ancient mandir. The Phool Walon ki Sair travels through uh, Mehrauli village, and therefore it's a procession. And of course, now it's a long celebration. There are many events that happen together with that, and so I'm going to talk about the start of this festival. How did it begin 200 years ago, a little over 200 years ago now? For that, one has to understand what was Delhi in the beginning of the 19th century. At this point, you had the Mughal emperors, of course, were in the fort. They were in the fort, but the Mughal Empire had all but gone. It had the Mughal emperor did not have any direct control over the territories of the empire, really. He himself, even in Delhi, had been for a long time the puppet of other powers, particularly towards the end of the 18th century, the Marathas, Sindhya in particular. In 1803, it's the British East India Company which conquered this area around Delhi, and the Mughal emperor became their puppet. The Mughal emperor was still very powerful symbolically. A lot of people around India thought of him as their ruler, and or at least felt that sovereignty, some sort of legitimacy to rule, came from the Mughal emperor himself. And therefore, because of that, the British too had to keep him on as their front. So for a long time, people often forget that for a long time, the East India Company coins carried the name and the image of the sorry, the name of the, not the image, but the name of the Mughal emperor. And rule was carried out in the emperor's name. So this was an interesting situation, that while they used him as a front, shall we say, in some ways, uh, he actually lived in the Red Fort, and his jurisdiction was really only in the Red Fort, not beyond it. And in the Red Fort, he lived with his extended family. What was happening in this period was that, in a somewhat wider context, for the British, Delhi was really towards the end of their territories. Beyond that lay Punjab, etc., which was obviously not been conquered till then by them in the early 19th century. And beyond that lay Russia, or rather the major geopolitical force at that point, a major empire. And in the early 19th century, the British had this great fear that Russia was in an expansionist mood, had signed a treaty with France under Napoleon, and they wanted that there should that and the British feared that this resurgent Russia would make inroads into Asia, and who knows when they would be at Delhi. I mean, seriously, this was a concern. And at this point, what was happening in Delhi was that Akbar II was on the throne. He had come to the throne in 1806, I think. I'm really terrible at dates. I think 1806. But anyhow, he had an older son. His eldest son was Abu Zafar. And the British wanted Abu Zafar to be declared the heir apparent to succeed Akbar II as the Mughal emperor eventually. Akbar II had different views. He had another wife. His most influential wife at that point was Mumtaz Mahal, and Mumtaz Mahal's son was Mirza Jahangir. And Mirza Jahangir was a young man at that point, must have been a late teenager. And they were very keen that he should be recognized as the heir apparent. And nothing could happen without British consent, because he was just really, the Mughal emperor was really less than a puppet in that term. So this tension was on. At that point, and Mirza Jahangir was a somewhat spoiled child. I mean, he was very indulged by his parents. The problem was that with all this happening, the background, the diplomatic, the military, strategic background of this, in 1808, uh, the British government, in their this is part of their secret papers. There was a secret department in the foreign department, and they wrote to the resident of Delhi. The resident was the highest British official in Delhi, and they wrote to him saying that suppose a European enemy approaches Delhi and Delhi is under threat, then to leave the Mughal emperor in the fort at that point would be very dangerous. I think they felt that, if another power captures the Mughal emperor, then they can use the Mughal emperor as their front to rule a lot of North India. So that kind of, very unspecified, or the idea was there. They said, what will we do then? And Seaton, who was the resident, said that it should be okay, if for we need to make sure that if such a thing happens, we have to be in military control of the fort. Now, what did that mean? It meant, but until this time, the security of the fort was the emperor's jurisdiction, and the security of the fort was managed by the emperor's own troops, the Najibs, and they were under the emperor's control. And Seaton said, we need to somehow, hopefully, circumstances will arise due to which we should be able to post our guards in the fort. If our troops are guarding the fort, then if an enemy attacks, we can quickly evacuate the fort and we will have complete control. We'll be able to take the family out of there. We will not leave the Mughal emperor sitting in the fort. Now, all this secret negotiation is happening, and within a month of this letter exchange having happened, the so-called circumstances arise, and which makes me actually personally feel that these were engineered by Seaton. And what happened was, that was a very complicated thing. The Kiladar, Bahadur Shah was persuaded by Seaton to give an order saying that no liquor will be brought into the fort. And then somebody was caught bringing liquor into the fort, and the commandant sent him back. The next night, somebody tried to enter the commander of the Mughal forces who are guarding the fort, wanted to enter his room to try and kill him, but he was finally, fortunately, the commander was not there, so he wasn't killed. Now, Seaton made this into one big tamasha with the emperor, and he said that, look how dangerous it is, there's no security, and this man might have been killed, and forget about the man being killed, your security would have been compromised, and this and that. And, he put a lot of pressure. He says, let the British protect you. And he brought in this huge, he said, let me bring in the troops. Now, at that stage, uh, Akbar II, of course, was not very happy about having these troops come in, but he really didn't have a choice, right? Because he was, as completely dependent on the British. So he is there while he's wondering what should be done about this. Mirza Jahangir, who was a much more impetuous young man, decides to take things into his own hands, so to speak. And as Seaton was really coming to visit the emperor with a little small entourage of mounted men, he takes up he mounts himself on some advantageous position with some more of his troops, and he fires on that. He fired on Seaton's group. Now, nobody was hurt. The bullet went through the cap of one of the soldiers who was accompanying Seaton. So that's all that happened. But of course, Seaton again made it into a huge thing, and he said that the resident has been attacked. This man needs to be. This is a huge security problem, and used that to really attack the fort, blow down the gates. In this thing, a few lives were lost, and the gate and the fort came under British control. From then onwards, even after that, there was a little bit of there was some negotiation, due to which ultimately they came to the agreement that they would move the company's troops would not guard the inside of the fort, but only the walls and the gates. So they did that, and the gate, British leader of the troops was posted on the gate, on the Lahori gate. He used to live on the Lahori gate. Now, after all this, they also decided to, Mirza Jahangir was a huge problem, they said, and he must be punished and he must be exiled. And he was exiled to Allahabad. And he was exiled to Allahabad, and this was in the end of 1808. And he stayed in Allahabad till 1809. In the meanwhile, of course, his parents were really distraught. They wanted, they were, not surprisingly, I guess, were very keen to get him back. And ultimately, Akbar II agreed to nominate Abu Zafar as his heir. And this is Abu Zafar who would go on to be Bahadur Shah Zafar, the emperor that we know, the last Mughal emperor. So he gave in to that. And as a response to that, the British allowed Jahangir to come back. Jahangir came back towards the end of 1809. While he had been away, his mother, Mumtaz Mahal, had vowed that if he came back, she would go and order, not order, but offer a chadar, a flower, a coverlet of flowers at the dargah of Qutub Bakhtiyar Kaki. Why exactly Qutub Bakhtiyar Kaki also needs to be understood. For the earlier part of Mughal rule in Delhi, it had been Nizamuddin's dargah, which had been the most revered by them, and therefore you see some of the somewhat earlier 17th and 18th century Mughals buried there. Humayun is not far from there. Jahanara is buried there. Muhammad Shah, the emperor, is buried there. By the later part of the 18th century, early 19th century, in fact, actually, even in the 18th century, Bahadur Shah I, who was the son of Aurangzeb, had built a mosque right next to the Qutub Dargah. So there was this reverence for the Qutub Dargah as well. And the later Mughal emperor Shah Alam II was buried there as well. So the Mughals used to visit Mehrauli quite frequently. And of course, they had a veneration for the Dargah. So this decision by Mumtaz Mahal to offer this chadar. They then called the Phool Walas of Delhi, the flower sellers, and they said that we need to commission this coverlet of flowers. And it was decided that pankhas would be added as well, and they would be offered at the temple of Jogmaya, which was a very important place too. So this uh, procession happened with the queen consort, Mumtaz Mahal, actually carrying the chadar in a huge basket on her own head and taking it to the dargah. There was a palace next to the dargah as well. So this Phool Walon ki Sair, this is how it began. She made this vow, and her fulfillment of the vow led to the start of this. And it was such a popular, people loved it. People loved it. One thing that's been said about the people of Delhi, and a lot of 19th century sources also repeat this, and the 18th century as well, such as Dargah Kuli Khan says, that the Delhi people loved a mela, any excuse to party. So they loved melas, and therefore this was a huge uh, it was something that they enjoyed thoroughly, and so they said, let's have it every year. And from that time onwards, they started having it every year. It was, and then it became something that was sponsored by the Mughal emperor, when a lot of people from Delhi joined in it. The original intention of that particular of Jahangir's story was probably pushed to the side a little bit. People forgot about it maybe after a while, but the Mela certainly continued. It continued uh, past Akbar II's reign. Even when Nadur Shah came to the throne, he continued to sponsor the Mela, and he used to, and the date used to be fixed in a very interesting manner. These days, it's held after the monsoon, but in those days it used to be held during the monsoon, because going to Mehrauli in the monsoon was a big thing. It was, the weather was nice, those that rain was nice. In fact, Bahadur Shah himself has written malhars about the monsoon in Mehrauli. So the Mughal royal family used to come to Mehrauli any case in the monsoon. So he used to fix a date every year. The Pulwalas used to come to him and say, you fix a date, and he would fix the date, and they would make the preparations. And then people used to go and they used to stay in Mehrauli for a number of days while this happened, and they enjoyed the monsoon there. The Mughal emperor, of course, and their family had houses there and the palace. But rich people also used to have second homes in Mehrauli. The others used to rent accommodation during that period in Mehrauli. And those who didn't have any place to stay just slept out or something, or went for the day and came back. So this was the Phool Walon ki Sair as it developed. Now, what happened to Jahangir? Jahangir, oddly enough, a year after he was back, said that he wanted to go away again. The reason was very interesting. He had probably got used to, some said he had got used to the lifestyle in Allahabad, and that lifestyle was very anglicized in some ways. He used to go around driving in a buggy, he used to drink a lot, and he liked that. He liked, and his father also at that point began to realize that it probably would be better for him to not be in Delhi, because he thought that if there were, if he was there when Bahadur Shah, or Sada Abu Zafar, came to the throne, then he would be under a disadvantage. So he thought it's probably better that he should not stay in Delhi. So he told Charles Metcalfe, who was by that time the uh, resident there, that he wants to go away. And he was again sent to Allahabad, but this time under his own volition. For various reasons, after that, he was not permitted to return, though he said several times that he wanted to come back, at least for visits, but he was never allowed to come back. His health deteriorated in, I think, 1820. He died uh, quite early in life, probably because of the effects of alcoholism. And his body was brought back and was buried in the Nizamuddin Dargah in Delhi. It's a beautiful, beautiful little tomb, a marble tomb with lovely carved screens, which is part of our heritage walks that we do in Nizamuddin. So that really is, in brief, the secret history of the Phool Walon ki Sair. In later times, because the details of how the British actually really wanted to get hold of the Red Fort and control over the fort through its own troops is really very poorly understood, because it's these files are very difficult to get at. I mean, I also happened to come upon them by I looked for them because I found references in the regular political files, and they really did not refer to this. I think there was just one reference which said secret files. I said, oh God, let's look at the secret department. And that's where I found these. So it was a great discovery for me. I loved it. And so I said, okay, there you have the reason. And they were really a lot more devious than we think they are. They were at that point. So anyhow, that's the Phool Walon ki Sair. I'd be happy to now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look and see if there are any questions. I'd be very happy to answer. Um, uh, uh, lot of you, okay, a lot of you joining up here. That's good. Please feel free if you have any questions. Very happy to see so many of you writing in your comments. Do remember that this is going to be, I'm going to save this video, so you can, if those who have missed, you can definitely see it again, may not have seen it from the beginning. And I'm going to try and do more of this. I'm going to try and see if I can do an illustrated talk. I believe you can. So you don't have to see just my mug through the entire process. I'll hope to. I always like to illustrate my talk. So let's see if the next one I'll do something where I can show a lot of picture and illustrate it. Trying to make it a regular thing, yes. And thank you. Thank you, Simin, by the way, for having suggested this. Thank you all. I mean, you ask whether Bahadur Shah was not the chosen heir. Do you think he was a reluctant last Mughal? I think Bahadur Shah was not reluctant. He really wanted to be emperor, but of course he's frustrated because he came to the throne very late. He was obviously by the time he came to the throne, the Mughal emperor's powers had been eroded even further. So he led a very frustrated life, but he was a and I really believe that he was a nice guy, and I've studied his period of rule quite well, and it's a very, very tragic story. But yeah, I mean, he would have liked to be a good ruler. He would have liked to be a ruler, and people really revered him. But unfortunately, as I said, a very tragic story. Yeah, Vidyanand Jha is asking, how did it become a symbol of communal amity? Because the Jogmaya and Dargah or Qutub Bakhtiyar Kaki involved in the same time. So it's the same procession which goes and offers to both places. That's the communal harmony part. And that's been a regular feature. This was actually and the British understood it very well, that this was a place where people came together and this was a sign of unity. Therefore, the Quit India movement began in 1942. They discontinued it. They banned it. They said, no, it will not take place. So it was discontinued at that point, and it was only later that, after independence, that it was again revived. Swati, the ceremony takes place today. It's become much of a thing. It's become much more. It's Sarkari in its, which is probably understandable. there are, I think there are pankhas which come from different states. Also, there are lots of events and things that happen, and it still happens. But I think that somehow that feeling of a this is a Delhi festival. This is a Delhi festival. This is a Mehrauli festival. That has become a little bit diluted. I think we it would be nice to kind of revive that in some way. I don't know when the next talk is going to be. Um, Ranveer Singh, as I said, the it was not discontinued after the revolt. For a few years, right after the revolt, for a few years it would have been disrupted, but it was again instituted. They came back and started doing it as a uh, the Phool Wala festival. It was just because um, it had a life which was beyond the Mughal emperor. It was a city. The city people wanted it, so therefore it did start. Daily evening talk. I will have to really work hard at that. Uh, was the Dushyant? You were asking, was the Mughal control restricted to Diwane Am and Khas? It was restricted to the actually the boundary of the Red Fort. So all of the Red Fort. Uh, Kusum Chopra, I think answered this question of what are the modern connotations of the Sair. Uh, the British, Deep Sen, the British had strengthened the city wall in 1803, not really the fort wall. Fort wall had been okay. It was the city's walls, gates, and bastions that they strengthened. Um, thank you, Shivani. Uh, yeah, Kiran Bhargav, about the 20th century post-independence, I have mentioned that. The Anjuman is Sair-e-Gul Farosha is the organization which runs the Phool Walon ki Sair now very competently. And as I said, it's a lovely festival, but I think that the city element has to be revived. Not that it is not there. I mean, the Sair starts with the lieutenant governor presenting pankhas, etc. Also, so it all that is there, but I think a lot more could be done. Um, why did Akbar II want Mirza Jahangir to succeed him? I think he was just bullied by his wife. Mumtaz Mahal was very keen about it, and he was Mumtaz Mahal's son. And she was at that point not only must have been the favorite because he gave her a lot of control. She had control over the dispersal of the all the money inside the fort, etc. She was a very powerful and influential lady. I think that was the main reason. Um, yeah, yeah. Yes, Muhammad Yunus, that print that you see at the back is the Jama Masjid by the Daniels. I Yes, of course, that's my sitting room. Has to be like that, right? What was the actual connection between the Dargah and the Jogwan? I think it's just a. I don't think there's any connection beyond the fact that they are located in the same place. They are very close to each other. Connaught Place. I am thinking, Parul, that for Connaught Place, I would like to maybe talk about Central Vista. People have been talking about Central Vista such a lot. So maybe, and I want to do that as a slide presentation because I really need to show a lot of pictures to make that come alive. So maybe I'll do that. Thank you, Shreya. Um, Adil, I don't think Bahadur Shah was a more of a saint. He wasn't. I mean, he was a spiritual person, but not to that extent. He liked a temporal role. Right now, I'm writing about the revolt of 1857. It's interesting how even in that stage of his life, he took such an active part in the administration of the city and in the nitty gritties of the administration. He was a great leader. If had a chance, he would have done well. Just 1857 had so many other things going on that it was too late really for him, I think. But he had a lot of potential to be a good ruler, but it's just that circumstances were such that there was no scope at all. uh, why he was sent to Allahabad. Allahabad, really, the British were using Allahabad as a sort of the fort was under their control, under the control of the army. They felt that it would be far away from Delhi and it was well secured. I think that was the only reason. I don't remember very well if any other reasons had been specifically um, advanced about that. Uh, that was Bhavna, your answer to your question. Mm, oh, that's interesting, Anil. I had not. Uh, ah, okay. All right. Rajesh, no, I don't think Phool Walon ki Sair has a connection with the flower market, because this was a completely, in fact, all the pankhas and the chadar and all used to be made in the sheher, in the city, in Shahjahanabad. And they used to be brought from here, there, in that procession. It was, Mehrauli was not, Mehrauli, you must remember when this started, Mehrauli was just a very small village. It was a very rural area, and all that, all the work of the making of the chadars and all that, which have been a very elaborate task, was all done in the city. Muhammad Yunus, I feel that Tara Shiko's grave, it's not possible. It's not possible. It's from what I, unless we find some really overlooked, unknown piece of evidence, some text or something, we are not going to be able to find this. And to me, it doesn't matter. How does it matter? We know he's buried somewhere there. Okay, that's fine. I mean, I'm not sure that we really need to know these things, and I think it doesn't matter so much. Hi, Rupa. Good morning. Wow, that's early for you. Why on St. John's Church is the name written in the Farsi script? Urdu was really the language of much of North India till very late into the 20th century. It's so. In fact, I remember, my grandmother's Bible, which my father now has, is in the Urdu script, and it's in Urdu, of course. So Urdu was the language which was used in many churches. So it's not at all surprising that the name is written in Urdu. Dushyant, I don't know why exactly Bakhtiyar Kaki instead of Nizamuddin for the Mughals. For a long while, I think it was both, because Bahadur Shah, the first, of course, was buried in near Bakhtiyar Kaki's um, Dargah, and on the other hand, you had um, Muhammad Shah Rangila later, after that, Nizamuddin. So I think it's mainly a personal thing. Uh, Arsh, I'm not sure. Bahadur Shah Zafar, Wajid Ali Shah, in terms of poetry, I'm the wrong person to ask this, because, I mean, I stud my knowledge of poetry is rather limited. I do enjoy some poetry. My exposure to poetry is very limited to just a very, very few poets who I do love a lot, like Ghalib. I really love Ghalib, but I just don't know enough, and I'm of course not knowledgeable enough to be able to compare Bahadur Shah and Wajid Ali Shah. Uh, Best picture book on past and present Delhi. Uh, um, uh, there are several. There are a couple, which is, one is Delhi 360 degrees, which is a very interesting thing on a panorama of Delhi. One is Delhi Red Fort to Raisina. These are interesting books. Um, if you've been looking at my posts from, I think from second half of 2016, I have been posting on Facebook a lot of visual material on Delhi. If you go back, and it's all public, and you can just go back over the my timeline and see from the beginning. You'll see a lot of Delhi stuff there, particularly in the earlier posts. Uh, Dost Khan, I'm really sorry that you couldn't see it. Maybe your page wasn't refreshed, but I will save this video and you'll be able to see it. You'll be able to see it. I'm so sorry about that. Varsha wanted to be buried in Mehrauli. Yes, that's very true, Varsha. He did want to be buried in Mehrauli, and unfortunately, of course, that was not possible. Uh, um, मिर्जा फरतुल्ला बेग्स बहादुर शाह जफर और फूलवालों की सैर। जी हाँ, आप अगर मेरा इसके बाद सुनेंगे किसी वक्त तो आपको ये पता चलेगा कि क्या थोड़ा सा मैंने इसमें एक्स्ट्रा ऐड किया है। Sorry, I don't know what's happening there. Sorry. ये I'm sorry, I don't know about Zawar ki Sardgah. Shikhare, the Pulwano ki said it happens after every soon, usually in October. Uh, is it still frozen, Manisha? Hopefully it is. Seeming that's quite right, actually. This whole offering of flowers, etc., is probably a very Indian thing, right? And many influences, of course. So, friends, what I'm going to do is I'm going to end here. It's been great talking to you, hearing your comments, and I'm going to save this video so people who have missed the earlier part can watch this at their convenience, and also hopefully be able to um, comment on it. So, thank you very much, and hope to do this very soon. And stay healthy, look after yourselves, and hope to see you soon. Bye.